Hello, and welcome to Youth Positively Speaking. My name is Paige Ewing, and I work with Prevention Resources as the multimedia specialist for Positive Youth. Prevention Resources is a nonprofit located in New Jersey that is dedicated to promoting health and wellness of individuals, families, and community through education, collaboration, advocacy, and treatment. Today, I have with me my co-host, Erin Cohen, the project coordinator of Positive Youth.
Thanks, Paige. Again, I'm Erin Cohen. I am the project coordinator for Positive Youth, and the Positive Youth Initiative focuses on building countywide capacity to reduce substance misuse in Hunterdon County for youth 9 to 20.
And today we also have one of our featured youth members, Erica. So welcome, Erica, and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, my name is Erica Ewing. I'm Paige's sister. I'm also a college student. I go to East Stroudsburg University and I'm studying biology. I'm a sophomore and things have been different this year.
That's the understatement of the year.
But so what we're talking about today is about mental health and substance use disorder and how oftentimes they go hand in hand. So to help us better understand mental health, we have one of our experts for this episode, Larry Cartwright, the president of the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Hunterdon County. So welcome, Larry.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And we also have with us to help us understand substance use disorder, our other expert for this episode, Rocky Schwartz, the family support coordinator at Prevention Resources Family Support Center.
Thank you, Paige. I'm honored to be here today.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We're very, very excited to have this conversation. We think it's so important to talk about mental health, especially since this is coming out right before May, which is Mental Health Awareness Month. But here at PR, we like to tie in substance use disorder as well, because we think it's one of those things that just doesn't get highlighted enough. But to kind of start us off, Larry, I would love for you to tell us a little bit about NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness of Hunterdon County, and kind of what you all do over there.
Okay, well, there is a chapter of NAMI in every county in the state of New Jersey, every state in the union and overseas. In Hunterdon County, we're all volunteers. We have no paid staff. We work out of our homes, use our cell phones, our home phones. And what we try to do is, it's basically, I look at it as a twofold type thing. We try to help the caretakers who may be parents or sister, brother, aunt, uncle, whatever, who are taking care of someone with a mental health issue. And we also, if someone with a mental health issue reaches out to us, we suggest various organizations that might help them and, you know, that they get the help they need. In this last year, it's been kind of brutal, to put it bluntly. You know, with the isolation that people have, either they're not in school, they're doing it from home, or they can't leave their house or whatever. If they have a mental health issue, that only feeds more into it. And a lot of times when they're faced with a situation like that, like you mentioned earlier, it'll go to narcotics or alcohol or something to that effect. So, you know, we try to help people, and that's basically what it's all about, is helping people. We do it in various ways. We have support groups that we run. Now, obviously, it's Zoom like you guys, you know, like this is, but it's twice a month. It's on the first and the fourth Thursdays of the month from 7:15. We also, we try to help people who call us. We have NAMI has a hotline. It's not manned all the time because we have somebody that checks it twice a day, but we do get back to you as soon as we can. A lot of times I'll give out my cell phone and they can call me directly. And we try to help people. It's, you know, and like I said, the problem this past year has been the way we're isolated. Yeah, this is nice, but it's not in person, you know. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? It's like, it's great that we can do this because we can see each other and we can talk and everything, but it's not like being in a room together where you know, so it's kind of tough.
Yeah. And I think Rocky, you too, like at family support, you kind of at NAMI support the family support also supports the family. Have you guys been seeing kind of the similar thing of just like everybody's really struggling right now?
So the families that we're serving, so we support families who have a loved one with substance use disorder. And we can talk more about, the very, very high, I think it's 50% of people that have substance use disorder also have a diagnosable mental health condition. But the current families that we support, there has been a tremendous amount of struggle this year with the isolation, but also with their loved ones who have not been able to access treatment because in the beginning of the pandemic, everything was shut down. Took a while
Mhm.
for everyone to figure out how to provide, how did Zoom work, for example. And
Right.
there were also telehealth laws that needed to be changed very quickly to allow some people to provide support via telehealth. So that was a problem. There's also been a problem where because of the pandemic, some people were very, very quickly released early from prison or from jails um, and not given any kind of support when they left. So instead of, we had, in some situations where the long-term plan was the person was supposed to go to treatment afterwards. Well, instead, they just got sent home. So the loved one was caring for them again. They don't have medication. They don't have any access to treatment yet. In many cases, if law enforcement was involved and they needed to have some drug testing, they weren't drug testing. So a lot of the accountability that helps people to stay on the path to recovery also disappeared. So it's been a very, very complicated time for family members. Um, and on the other hand, we are getting fewer referrals because for example, when someone overdosed, they would go into the emergency room, and if the family member was with them, the family member would be referred to us. Families are not allowed in the emergency room anymore. So
Mm.
there's a lot of people falling through the cracks.
I didn't even think about that, Rocky, actually, about how you can't have somebody in the hospital right now. I mean, that really, I'm just so shocked by that. Not that I'm shocked that you can't get in the emergency room right now, but I'd never pieced that together when
Yeah.
there's an overdose.
So if there's Narcan deployed, for example, and the person's taken to the emergency room in the past, in the many counties that we serve, um, the peer that's working in the emergency room was able to give the family member, let's say mom, for example, here's a card, you can go call these people and they will support you. And by the way, Larry, we frequently say, please go to the NAMI support groups too. But that is gone.
Yeah. I
And through
think
this
that's what's
past year too, through this past year also, we've seen all these mental health issues skyrocketing, anxiety, depression, the isolation. But then on the other hand, we're also seeing so many other people using substances at high rates,
Yep.
because they're trying to cope with the pandemic, a lot of drinking and other substances being used. So, you already had all those folks that were being serviced before, but now you're adding in a whole new set of people because of the past year and how difficult it's been.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm. And I think that's like something that, we don't recognize is how many people have a mental health condition or have a substance use disorder. I mean, it's so incredibly common. And but there's still this huge stigma around talking about mental health or talking about substance use disorders. We always do research for these episodes. And so I was like, how many is it? Like, I want to know. And so, pulling out the little bit of statistics over here, 1 in 5 adults in the US experience a mental health condition. And for youth, it's 1 in 6. So, this affects youth just as much as it does adults. And then for those who have a substance use disorder, there's 20 million Americans ages 12 and up who have a substance use disorder. And so this is not something that is uncommon, especially now with the pandemic. I wouldn't be surprised if those numbers skyrocket within the next year when we're finding out who needs help. And Erica, I mean, have you seen stuff like in college of people like really struggling with mental health and substance use or anything like that?
Yeah. Fortunately, none of my friends have struggled with substance abuse disorders, but definitely mental health. Everyone is just upset. We all want to go back to school. We feel like we're missing out on the best years of our lives. And also we're missing out on a lot of like learning opportunities. I mean, I don't feel like I'm learning as much as I would on campus, and also like internships and working with professors and stuff like that. And that just makes me deeply sad because at the end of the day, I am there to learn. While having fun is important too. I want to learn, and that's not happening, and that's affecting a lot of kids. So
yeah, I mean, Erin, you even have school age children, and I know that you like every time they're like, school, it's not the same.
It's not the same. And I've seen so many struggles with my own kids with mental health this year that we've never seen up until this point. A lot of depression and anxiety. I mean, even with COVID itself has brought on a lot of anxiety, not even necessarily the school aspect, but just COVID and getting sick or bringing it home, all those things.
Yeah.
The other thing that I haven't heard many people talk about is for someone who has a psychotic disorder, for example, and there's paranoia. Seeing everybody in the entire world wearing a mask is quite challenging to try to cope with.
That's interesting, Rocky, because I can remember the very first time I was in Costco when I put a mask on to go to the store. And it was before it was mask mandated, but it was when people were really starting to wear the mask. And it was the most horrifying experience. And I just felt like crying the entire way through the store because I couldn't believe that this is where we were. And I couldn't believe that this was happening right now. It was very, very scary and almost traumatizing.
Mm-hmm. I remember the first time I went out, it was at ShopRite. I was terrified. I did not want to go, but my mom needed help getting groceries for my grandmother. I was like, I don't want to go out. I don't want to go out. I was going to have an anxiety attack in the middle of ShopRite because I was so frightened in the beginning and walking around seeing everybody in masks. I was like, I'm not going down any aisles any other people were. And like, luckily that's faded. But I think for a lot of people, those feelings haven't faded and they haven't gone away. And that's really hard to cope with.
So if you struggled with anxiety before that, and you had paranoid thoughts that you thought people were out to get you, can you imagine?
No.
Or if you struggled with depression beforehand, and so the isolation, maybe the only thing that made a person feel better was to get out and go to the office and have a cup of coffee with somebody, and that's gone. And it kind of makes sense that if you're struggling that way, and then the liquor store or the pharmacy or the drug dealer will deliver to your home and soothe all that stuff, I don't know if that helps to understand why these things co-occur.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I really like the thing that Christine had told us on our last episode where it was like, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Because sometimes you can't really identify what came first. Is it the substance use disorder or is it the mental health issue? Did one cause the other or did the other one cause it? And so, I mean, it is hard to identify that sometimes, right, Rocky and Larry?
Yeah, it's hard because a lot of times people will go to alcohol or drugs because their mental health issue is creating such a panic in their head that it sort of soothes it, and makes it easier for them. Not that it's any better for them, because it's not, obviously, but, and, the thing is too, that a lot of times people will get discharged from, say, the hospital after a couple days, or 30 days in a hospital, and they'll come out, and after a day they'll stop taking their meds because they feel great. Well, a lot of times in classes I teach, I'll say, well, have you ever gone to the doctor and the doctor prescribed a medication for you and said to take it for 10 days, and after 6 you felt great? So what'd you do? Stop taking it. Well, they do the same thing. The problem is that then their illness comes back, and it may come back even worse than it was. And I think that a lot of times, being isolated, I would venture to say the 5 of us don't like being crammed into, our room and have to stay home and all that. Can you imagine if we all had some kind of a mental health issue? How that would affect, yeah, we can go out in the yard or whatever, but, or we can go to ShopRite, and wear a mask, which I hate. But, it's just not the same if you have a mental health issue. And I think a lot of times with youth, I think it even affects them worse because they're not seeing their friends. Yeah, they're seeing them on like this, but that's not, to me, that's not seeing them, because you're not in person with them. You're not going to a dance, or you're not going to the movies, or, that sort of thing. And that can have a serious effect on, on youth or young adults,
I myself, I actually am diagnosed with anxiety and depression and OCD. And we'll just add it on there, and ADHD. But especially the depression and the anxiety for all of this, I mean, it's just like, no one wants to be at home alone all the time. But I mean, it makes it so much harder when you have like a predisposition almost, like, to be sad. Like, I don't know if that's how you should put it, but it's just like, it just makes it 10 times harder. And I can't imagine. I mean, I luckily have a really great support system. I mean, I have my sister, I have my parents. I mean, so many people. I have medication that luckily works for me, but I just can't imagine for people who don't have that, how like unbelievably difficult this whole thing would be.
Well, and I know. Go ahead, Paige.
So no, I was going to say, and I know even for myself, like, I have my own mental illnesses. And then also in our family, we have a history of substance use. And so I know, like, I've been on high alert this entire time of how much alcohol am I consuming? What medications am I taking? Because I know that, so many people will turn to, even the pills in their cabinet. They're like, oh, I'll just take an extra Xanax. It's fine because my doctor gave it to me. But that's how so many people, become, like needing these different, even prescription medications. And so I'm so hyper aware of how I'm coping with the pandemic and my life, because I know that my mental illness and, family history of substance use puts me at that much higher risk for having a really, really big issue.
But you have each other and you have your family, which is a great support system.
Mm-hmm.
But we have 4 kids, and my youngest son attempted suicide twice when he was 20. And after this, well, what happens was that he was going to community college, and it was Christmas break, and I was going to do some painting around the house, so I bought a 2-gallon can of turpentine. Well, he drank it, all 2 gallons of turpentine. The doctors were amazed that it didn't burn his whole insides out, but it didn't. And when they, got him better, they put him in Trenton Psych, and he was there for almost 20 months. And then Whitman was governor, and she said, if you have a state mental health hospital in your county, you get transferred there. So we got transferred to Hagedorn when it was open, and he was there for another 11 months. And I noticed we'd go I would work different hours so I could go in the afternoon. Priscilla would go at night. We'd both go on Saturdays and Sundays to see him. I can't tell you how many people, youth like he was, in the hospital, and nobody went to see him ever.
Yep.
And, I'd say to my son, well, does so-and-so have anybody coming? He says, nope, never, And
Wow.
he says, you guys have come more than most of the people around. And it's just so scary. It's so sad that just because somebody has an issue, a lot of the families have just, see you later.
And I think what happens is people can't see a mental health issue. So if there's a mental illness, people don't see it. So they just think, oh, that person's toxic or whatever. And we need to treat mental illness like a broken leg or like cancer or something like that.
Yeah, it's very complicated because all we see are the symptoms,
Right.
right? Either the symptoms of like a person who's depressed or a person who's acting out, or if they're under the influence of any kind of drugs or alcohol, those symptoms are not pretty and they do alienate families. And Larry is
I
so
can't tell
right that,
you.
and the other thing
Go ahead,
is,
Rocky. I'm sorry.
well, the other thing is that even for families who care so much, they don't know what to do. And that's why Larry is near and dear to my heart, because there is help out there for people, for families, because in most cases now, the loved one's going to end up, if they're lucky, 30 days, more than likely 5, 6, 7. And then the family member is left with trying to figure out, how do I help this person? And it is very confusing. It's very, you talk about the stigma. Sometimes people don't tell their own extended family. They don't tell their neighbors, right? So it's such a gift to be able to, and it's terrifying to go to like a support group. But to know that you're not alone makes such a big difference, because you're not. And then you soon find out that it's happening. What did you say? 1 in 5? Think about your neighborhood or your town, 1 in 5 homes, right?
Right.
It's happening everywhere. And the one good thing that I think is, I'm curious what you think about this, Larry. The one thing that I see changing from this pandemic is mental health conditions or mental illnesses are being normalized. More people are talking about this. We still are not talking about the addiction piece of it as much, but at least people are talking about anxiety and depression. What do you think about, do you agree with that, Larry?
I do. I agree with that. Yes, very much so. If I can, just real quick, my son has been well for, he's considered a success story by the hospital. He has been working, has his own apartment for the last 8 years in Flemington. And he's been working at BJ's, and he takes his meds religiously. The only thing he'll question is if they increase or decrease, why are you doing this? That's the only he'll ask, which is fine, But other than that, like I said, he's considered a success story. His illness is paranoid schizophrenia, and he's been epileptic since he's 5. So that had a lot of problems with his medication, and back and forth. One interfered with the other, and the other interfered with the epileptic medication. So, but they found a cure for the epilepsy. Not a cure, but it's a medication that he had a doctor that was from India, and in India they had this medication for 35 years. And he'd go to India to see his family, and he'd smuggle it back and give it to some of his patients who had 14, 20 seizures a day. Mark had 5 to 7 a week. So, but they finally got him cured to, approved to get this medication. He went in the hospital. They drained him off his epileptic medication, gave him this medication. He's had 2 seizures in 3 years.
Wow.
He used to get 5 to 7 a day. A week. I'm sorry, not a day, but a week. And one of the seizures he had was, the doctors admit it was their fault because they screwed up the medication by not talking to each other. So, but I think a lot of times, I think somebody said it before, I don't think families a lot of times want to deal with it. I got to be honest with you. When this first happened, it was 6 years before I'd even talk about it. People would say to me, Larry, how's the family? Oh, Paul is great. Scott's good. Sherry's good. I got 4 kids. I wouldn't even mention Mark. And it was till somebody grabbed me, my wife actually, and threatened to beat me with a hammer if I didn't go with her to intensive family support. And the lady that was there at the time has since passed away, but she convinced me how to do it, how to get through it. And this may sound morbid, but in my mind, I pictured my son in a casket. He died. Now I have another son who's schizophrenic, and I'll do everything I can to help him. And hopefully I've done everything I could to help him over those last years. But the first 6, I wouldn't even talk about it. I'd go visit him in the hospital when he was in the state hospitals. Yes, I would do that. And, I'd give him money and, to buy things at the hospital and stuff. But I wouldn't talk about it to people. I sure as hell wouldn't do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
you are an amazing advocate for your son.
I mean, and that's the thing, like, it's so hard. For me, I, didn't talk about my mental illness until I was in college. And then I went to get help and they were like, oh, that's a bigger problem. You need to go seek a big professional. And I was like, oh my gosh. And all of a sudden I had to do all this self-advocacy because I was afraid of telling my family. And even most of my family doesn't know, because I'm not just going to tout my little flag around and be like, dee, 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 look at me, I have this problem. But I shouldn't be ashamed of that, of saying like, I have a mental illness and it's okay. And I think it's such a hard thing to do, even ourselves. We face our own self stigma, if you want to say, of like, well, what will people think of me? And I can't even imagine what that would be like for substance use. I was doing research before this and I couldn't find all this stuff that I could about mental health as for substance use. And I was like, it's so crazy that even now we have so much stigma around these topics that go hand in hand, really, so much of the time.
So
I do think it's getting better. I do think it's getting better in the sense that young people, Erica's age, my children's ages, I have 2 high schoolers, and I think that they're talking about it more now and they're accepting of it. It's just a matter of the way the world is changing. I think, I always laugh. I always just still feel like I'm young myself, but, I'm getting older in the generations from the young people. And, they just are so much more accepting of things and willing to talk about things, because nobody was talking about this when I was your age, Paige. Nobody was talking about it. And I find that people my age may still question it, and there is stigma around it. Substance use, when Rocky, when my family witnessed the woman overdosing and they did the Narcan and saved her, and I was talking about how everyone should be Narcan trained, and people still, there's so much stigma around that in itself too. They're willing to talk about somebody that has anxiety, depression, paranoia, schizophrenia, but they don't want to talk about people who have substance use disorder. They don't want to look at them as a person. It's their fault. It's their fault, right? And so there is still a lot of stigma around that. So I'm hoping, Erica, you guys are going to be more willing to talk about it and, breaking that stigma.
Yeah, I think that choice piece that you just talked about, Erin, people
Mhm.
still think that with substance use disorder, yes, you do make a choice to pick up that first drink or to take that first pill. But once your brain changes and you become addicted, it's not a choice anymore. And then throw in that you may have a very serious depression or anxiety disorder or OCD, and you got racing thoughts and you take a pill and it calms it down. The combination of the two works for a while. It's just not sustainable. And so that choice piece is what people judge. And it's the judgment is powerful and it's still strong. I'll give you, if you'd like me to give you an example. So I am in recovery. When my children were younger, and this is part of the problem. So until we start sharing success stories, like Larry just shared a success story, I didn't talk about being a woman in long-term recovery for a long time because the stigma affected people's feelings. That they would judge me. So I had a friend, for example, that other people in her children's preschool where she was carpooling found out that she was a recovering alcoholic. And so they got together and decided she could not be in the carpool for field trips anymore. And so I used to be a substitute teacher when my kids were little. There was no way that I was going to say, I'm a woman in recovery from alcoholism and substance use disorder. Now I can, but there's still a tremendous amount of judgment.
Yeah.
And I think that's the first step is, in this conversation, educating people, telling our stories, and just, becoming kinder about people who are different, whether, it's that they have a mental health condition or they have a substance use disorder or anything really. But I want to just say thank you so much, Larry, Rocky, and Erica, for joining us today, because this is the first step in saying that so many people have these issues and it is common, and there is treatment and there is support. So you're not alone. So thank you, Erica, for being our youth today. Thank you to our experts, Larry and Rocky, for giving us just such great information. And for more information about mental health and co-occurring disorders, please visit our website at njprevent.com/positive youth. And thank you for listening in. We'll see you next time for more Youth Positively Speaking. Hi, everybody. This is just like a post-podcast notes that Erin and I wanted to do. We thought that we talked about such great resources on this episode. We wanted to go a little bit further in depth with NAMI, the Recovery Center. And I also kind of dropped that we're having an event coming up at the end of May. So we wanted to talk a little bit more about that too. So a little bit more about NAMI of Hunterdon, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. They do have a 24/7 hope line. The phone number is 1-855-654-6735. That number is 1-855-654-6735. And so that is a great hotline that you can call anytime if you or someone you love is in need of help concerning mental illness. They'll walk you through it. They'll offer support. They have meetings. NAMI is all over the country. We have one in Hunterdon, and so they have really, really great resources. So we wanted to make sure that you all know that you can go on their website or you can call that hope line as well. And of course, we want to talk a little bit more too about our Family Support Center. The Family Support Center offers free confidential support to family members who have a substance use disorder. And the advocates meet with families by the phone, email, or even by text. So there's lots of great ways that you can talk to the advocates at the Family Support Center. In addition, they also host a weekly support group on Zoom, and that's held every Wednesday at 6:30. And you can get that Zoom link either by emailing Erin or I, or visiting them on Facebook or their website. Sharing the Hope is their Facebook handle. And of course, you can also contact Rocky Schwartz, who was on the podcast. Her email is rschwartz, so rschwartz at njprevent.com for more information. So NAMI and the Family Support Center are both really, really great resources if you need help. And please contact us, Rocky, or NAMI if you ever need anything for substance use disorder or mental health as well.
We also want to talk a little bit about our Break the Stigma HC virtual run walk. This is our second annual race, and it is going to be held virtually May 28th through the 31st, which is Memorial Day weekend. And the great thing about this race is that you can pick your date. So it can be any of those dates from the 28th through the 31st. You get to pick your distance. You want to do a 2K, do a 2K. You want to do a 5K, pick a 5K. And then you get to pick your route since this is virtual. So you can do it in one of the beautiful Hunterdon County parks. You can do it right in your neighborhood. You can get together with a friend, anything that you want to do. So we did this race last year, right as the pandemic was really going on. And it was a way for us to get out. And we know running and walking is a great coping skill. And we're really trying to get people to #break the stigma. So that is to start talking about mental health, that it's okay not to be okay. And also, we're trying to break the stigma with substance use. Addiction is a brain disease. So if you want to register and join us for our second annual Break the Stigma HC virtual run and walk, the information is below. Please register and join us. Last year, we had over 100 people do it.
Yeah, so thank you all so much for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time for more Youth Positively Speaking.